Thank you very much. I'm delighted to join you this Tuesday to talk about leap year, how to make big decisions, become more resilient and change your life for good. So when you hear the word change, what's your first response? Excitement, butterflies, or the fear? Because as someone who cleaved like a barnacle to the status quo until recently, my response was fear. I was terrible at making decisions, and as someone who kind of knew that she had to make more decisions in life, this was something I felt I should address. So as we heard, so as a former London-based magazine journalist, I'd been living far from home since 2013 when my husband was offered his dream job working for Lego in Denmark. And we liked it there. We had made a life for ourselves. We had a son there. But being part of the sandwich generation and family illness made us feel that after 4 years, it was probably time to come home. There was just one problem. I was terrified of the change. So after several weeks of hiding under my desk and mainlining Hobnob's artist's impression, I decided that I was going to have to do something. I was all out of Hobnobs, and I was going to have to try my second favourite coping strategy, which is Googling. And I learnt that as well as being terrifying, there are 7 classic reactions to change. These are denial, anger, confusion, depression, crisis, acceptance, and then hopefully new confidence. Because although change can be scary, it's really good for us as well. Studies show that trying new things releases dopamine, and when we try new things, it can even seem as though our time is passing more slowly. Just as when you're doing something that's really familiar, it seems like time's going really fast. The opposite is also true. So I knew that there were some really positive things about this. When we begin a new relationship or a new job or even a new friendship, we are the best version of ourselves because our energy bank is still in credit, we are more motivated, and we do our best to be polite. You know, we look our best, we try hard. So I knew that there were some positive things. And now it's not always our decision to start over. Change comes in many guises for many of us these days, with 42% of marriages end in divorce, and the average person our age gets made redundant 3 times in a lifetime. So change is often thrust upon us, and that gives it a different heft. But either way, we have to know how to deal with it. Modern life is moving faster than ever, and to be resilient and to cope, it's vital to know how to handle big alterations like this. So, out of character and feeling quite brave, I decided I was going to have to get better at this and set myself a challenge to spend a year learning to be more resilient, learning the best tools of change from the worlds of neuroscience, psychology, alternative therapies, the business world. My husband works in business and would come home with all sorts of strange and mad theories that I would generally scoff at, but now I started bringing the books down from the shelves, leafing through them, as well as some more unusual areas of life. FBI hostage negotiation, for example, was an eye-opener for me. And I decided I was going to find the best tools to become more resilient and to turn myself into a lean, mean change machine. So this was an ambition pledge that was to form the basis of my new book, Leap Year. And I decided to start with the thing that many of us struggle with at this time of year after a nice long break at home where all we've had to worry about is what quality street to eat next. I started off by looking at work and careers and how I could make changes there and how we could tweak things with small changes to make a big difference. So the first of these is work-life balance. And coming from Denmark, the country with the best work-life balance in the world, I thought I would start by looking a little close to home. So Copenhagen-based work-life balance expert Martin Bjerregaard advises everybody to pretend they have a family and give their leisure time the same emphasis and prioritize it in the same way that you would if you had kids to rush back to. And this has a really interesting effect, trickle down, because if you're prioritizing your leisure time, you are more motivated when you're doing your work because you think, well, I'm going to do something fun in a little while. You also get out of the office on time by setting yourself these artificial deadlines. And it means that you have a more balanced approach to work and life. The second top tip that I learnt in terms of making changes in the workplace was dance. So I spoke to a man called Dr. Peter Lovett from the University of Hertfordshire, who is delightfully known as Dr. Dance. And he told me that they've done research into the power of dance to help with confidence and decision making. And they found that if you do an improvised freestyle dance, this will help if you're trying to think creatively. And if you do something more structured, like a samba, grapevine, or something more ambitious like this can help when there is a single solution type problem that you're trying to solve. So I gave this a go with grapevine, nothing this ambitious. The next thing I learnt was that having an office crush can be incredibly advantageous to your work and your home life. Bear with me. So, I was sort of scanning around anything that I couldn't trial myself. I was roping in guinea pigs, so friends and family who I was going to say, right, you need to try this thing. And a woman who'd been in her job for 17 years, happily married, mother of 3, told me that her secret was fostering a workplace crush wherever she was. She'd been in the same job for 17 years, but she'd moved around teams. She even bought her husband her latest crush's perfume, so he smelled like him. Give it a whirl, don't judge yet. And so I thought, well, that sounds a bit kooky, but fine, I'll give it a whirl. And then I spoke to psychologists who kind of backed up this hunch, because it means that we are more motivated to go to work in the morning. We make an effort to look our best. We perform well, and it means that you never sort of dread Monday morning, because it's always kind of fun. So there is actually some science behind it. However, as someone who works from home with just the dog for company, this presented me with some problems. Fortunately, at my son's daycare, where I spend the second biggest chunk of my time, one of the dads works for the Air Force, who does the pickup at the same time as me, and regularly rocks up in full-on Top Gun outfit. So I'm calling Maverick from Top Gun on this one, and I will regularly have quite the spring in my step before my first coffee of the day, having taken this tip on board, so I recommend. The next tip was to make like Wonder Woman. So many of you might have heard of this. There's psychologists from Harvard University studying the impact of powerful poses in the animal kingdom found that by standing in a high power pose, an expansive pose for 2 minutes, you can make yourself more confident. It releases testosterone and it reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. So whereas in the animal kingdom, from apes to sort of all sorts of creatures and again humans, we all expand when we're feeling more confident. But we can also expand and then feel more confident. There's a cause and effect, and you can get the benefits by faking it. So if you stand with your feet apart, with your arms either up in the air or on your hips, a la Wonder Woman, when I had hips, you can, for just 2 minutes, you can do this power pose and get this sort of surge of confidence. So experts recommend doing this before you're going into a tough meeting or before interviews. I ended up doing it before a radio interview I was particularly nervous about. Didn't realise it was a glass-fronted office. People laughed. But it was fine. It still went well because I had that confidence and I didn't care because I was Wonder Woman. So that's another good one. And then the other thing that really helped were in terms of career, and it's a slightly longer one and worth a Google, is interrelationship diagrams, where you learn to work out what your values are and check that your current role is adhering to these values. So I would really recommend that as well if you're feeling a bit meh after Christmas, which obviously you can't say out loud, but you can be thinking it, and just interrelational diagrams, that's what you need. The next thing that I looked at, the next area of life that I wanted to explore and try out some experiments in change in, was relationships. So as someone who'd been with her husband for 7 years at the time of writing, I was acutely aware of the 7-year itch, mostly because people kept reminding me of it, which was helpful and kind. But this is the decline in relationship satisfaction that typically occurs around this sort of time, and it's medically proven. Psychologists aren't quite sure why it is. They think it might be because in olden days you'd have had your children by then, and so you could move on. So there was no need to stay pair bonded with somebody past the 7-year point, which is fine, but it wasn't that convenient really. So I needed to sort of make this work and wanted to know if there were some changes I could make in my own life to just sort of refresh it a little bit. So I started speaking to psychologists, to learning a bit more about what happens in our brains when we fall in love, the science of attraction. And the first thing that struck me was how pernicious popular culture around romance is, and the lies that we're fed, and just sort of the warped idea that many of us get about love and about romance. So the first lesson I would love to impart is to stop watching rom-coms. So I've never been big on fairy tales or Disney, and I don't buy the big bombastic, is it still raining, I hadn't noticed type Hollywood ending. For a start, nobody with hair that curly would fail to notice rain. But actually, studies show that rom-coms can officially damage our health and ruin our love lives, because they promote as normal what in real life we would view as stalker-supporting beliefs regularly. So, you know, the man who obsessively stalks his childhood crush, there's something about Mary, lovely. Or somebody who obsessively films the object of their desire and then turns up on her doorstep with flashcards. Love, actually. You know, these are not healthy ways to be looking at life. And I think as well, because the saccharine image of what love and what relationships look like that is regularly portrayed in Hollywood films means that the reality often disappoints. And I have several friends who are beautiful, intelligent, warm, funny people, but are perpetually single because they've had their expectations warped by Hollywood endings, and they come, you know, expecting a partner to come along complete with a Tom Hanks voiceover. And it doesn't happen. Another issue is that rom-coms often end on happily ever after, when in real life that's when the hard work starts. And choosing the one has been proven to be only about 10% of having a good relationship. The rest is hard work and relationship skills, and these have to be learned. So, cognitive behavioural therapy has been proven to be one of the most helpful tools for changing a relationship, for increasing some sort of spark back into one where it's gone a bit flat, or when starting out in dating, to approach dating in a new, fresh way. And the first lesson I learnt was to put in a no fantasy filter. So many of us, especially with social media and in the times that we live in, we see an endless stream of other people's supposedly perfect relationships. So if you're dating, the advice from psychologists is to go into a new relationship or go out for a date without the expectations, acting as your own coach almost, thinking, what would my best friend say to me? Because often we're harsher to ourselves than we are on other people. And nobody else's relationship is as perfect as their social media feed makes out. I also learnt not to perhaps sugarcoat my relationship so much either. I think many of us also only take pictures when things are good. You don't take pictures of when you've just rowed with your partner or when your toddler is just pooing himself on the floor. Unless you're me, because I've started doing this as well. And it's an interesting exercise, because by documenting my life as it really is, not as some sort of idealized fantasy filter, it means I'm better prepared and better equipped to deal with the tough times when they come around again. And it's less of a surprise because I know I've dealt with that before. That's okay. And I've learnt not to trust anybody who posts on Facebook or on Twitter that they have the best husband/wife/significant other in the world, instead of saying it to them in person over breakfast, because that's madness. The next thing I learnt was to make a Neville Chamberlain style list. Now, one of the exercises in cognitive behavioural therapy is about learning to appreciate your partner and see where their values lie and see what makes them happy. So psychologists recommend writing something called a loving action list, which sounds horribly cringe, actually surprisingly useful. You write down 30 things that make what your partner does that make you feel loved and appreciated, and your partner does the same, then you swap lists. I see nodding, this is good. And with this list in your hand, you have a concrete examples of ways to make your partner feel special and to make them feel appreciated. And it can be an eye-opener, even in a long-term relationship. I learnt that I seem to love my husband much more when there are snacks involved or he's keeping me warm in some way. I know, I hoped it was a little bit deeper than that, but no. And he likes me a lot more when I've slept well and exercised. So, you know, these are useful lessons to learn 7 years in. The next top tool, and a life lesson always as far as I'm concerned, is to channel your inner Joan Collins. So, the psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner, in her book Marriage Rules, noted that we have more control over our behaviour than we might think. So we might think there is something our partner or somebody we're dating does that really winds us up or that we just can't tolerate. But actually, we can behave better if we think about it in a different way and reframe it slightly. So Harriet Lerner, this psychologist, counselled a couple who were constantly at each other's throats, always arguing, until a house guest came to stay, an esteemed professor. And whilst he was staying in their spare room, they were so mindful of being overheard rowing that they were the nicest they'd ever been to each other. Didn't row once. So now she recommends that everyone else invents an imaginary house guest and sees if it makes a difference. So my husband and I tried it. I chose Joan Collins as someone I'd want to be on my best behaviour in front of. My husband chose Manta Ray Bond, Timothy Dalton from Licence to Kill, which I felt was a poor choice, but it worked. We were nicer to each other. We made it to a friend's new house for lunch with nobody having raised their voices or thrown the sat-nav out of the window. And we learnt that we are able to control our behaviour. We are able to behave a lot better to each other than perhaps we felt that we could be. And we're often a lot nicer to our friends than we are to our spouses. So imaginary Joan Collins now reminds me to just be a bit nicer. The next area of life that I looked at and wanted to find out the best change hacks around was friendship. So friends have always been hugely important to me. They are my scaffolding, my sounding board and my release. And in the company of good friends, we can just be ourselves, not anyone's employer or employee or spouse or parent or child. We're just us, which is liberating. But after the formal festivities of friendship are over, after sort of university, school, whatever, sort of endless weddings, one summer I had 9 weddings in a row. I was so skint and hungover for about 10 years. I sort of took these for granted. But once these start to die out, it can be harder and harder in our busy lives to see our close friends as much as we might like. And friendships can't be sustained on nostalgia alone. So there does have to be some cutting to the chase sometimes, which may not feel hugely natural, but can be really advantageous when it comes to keeping a close bond with friends who have formerly been close and we want to keep them that way. So even when we're busy, even when we're working long hours, we can kind of maintain those friendships with some good psychological techniques. My favourite of which is the 6 thinking hats, which some of you may be familiar with. This is Edward de Bono's, the Maltese psychologist's system of thinking, whereby you wear a different coloured hat to channel a different way of thinking, and it boosts empathy, it boosts honesty. It's often used in business, sometimes used in schools, and I wanted to see if it could be used for friendships as well. So as modelled on this occasion by Her Majesty the Queen, I'm going to take us through how these work. So the blue hat you can wear is the managing hat, used to begin to lay out the subject of the discussion. I decided to try it with 2 close friends who were going through a tough time and were having trouble perhaps opening up about the struggles that they were going through. One of them lived alone and was feeling a little bit lonely, and loneliness is a really hard thing to talk about, especially if you live in London and you have a busy, apparently active social life. Loneliness is still a big problem for many of us. So we wanted to find a way to let her open up about this. So we set this out as the topic of the discussion. And then we moved on to the white hat, which is all about gathering information, working out what we know about the situation, what we can do about it, facts only. And then the red hat, which is worn for a 30-second unfiltered brain dump. It's your instinctive gut reaction where you're supposed to be able to be really honest, because you're not thinking, you're just speaking. So you're saying, I feel lonely, I feel sad, and you can say these things in a far less cringe way than normal, because it's part of a structured way of thinking. It's part of a game. It takes away some of the personal sting. The next hat is the black hat. That's reasons to be cautious. So you might, in our example, we sort of said, well, London's a big city, there's always stuff going on, lots of people are lonely, we just have to get on with it, people are busy. And then yellow hat, reasons to be positive. So thinking about, well, actually, it's a big city, it means that there's lots more people, there's a bigger pool where you could find more people to hang out with, where we could all support each other a bit better, we could make more of an effort. And finally, the green hat, the hardest hat of all the colours to pull off in real life, is what to do next, is the green shoots idea. It's creative thinking about what we should do next, how we should move forward. So my friends and I tried this. We also did it with wine, I should clarify, but by doing these hats and changing these hats, they can be imaginary, but I don't like to pass up an opportunity for millinery. So I ordered a few on Amazon, and we wore these different hats. It cut to the chase, and it was fun because we were doing something frankly daft, but we were able to be honest and open up in a way that we hadn't for a long time. And now we're closer than ever. So it was a mates millinery win-win, and we were very happy with our green hatted outcomes. The next thing to bear in mind in terms of friendship is culling ones that are no longer working for you, which may sound harsh, but studies show that in the animal kingdom and in human groupings, we each have a set number of friends beyond which we can't really compute relationships in any real way. So the Oxford psychologist Dr. Robin Dunbar has studied monkeys and people for this, and we each need 5 close friends, 15 good friends, and then 150 in our outer circle, and that's everybody we know, like really know, to talk to that we like. So there are different boundaries of time set on each of these levels. So the 5 close friends we should be seeing once a week, the 15 should be once a month, and the 150 should be once a year. And drop below that and someone drops quite easily into the next level, because relationships take work and they take an investment of time and energy. So we can't be doing that for lots and lots of people. And contrary to popular culture and TV shows like Friends, good friendships, even the best of friendships, may not last forever. So having a cull and shedding off ones that aren't working for you anymore doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human. And actually, once you can concentrate on the people who are in your key group, you're a lot happier and you have more energy and you can engage with them a lot more. But if you are culling, that means you're also perhaps opening up space for new people in your life, which can be a bit scary as a grown-up. When you're a kid, you just say, do you like swings? I really like swings, and then you're friends. But as a grown-up, it's more complicated. It's a nuanced social dance. So 2 really great ways I learnt about making friends as an adult, thinking, well, if I have to relocate, I'm going to be starting over in some capacity. I learnt to have a big night out and channel my inner Tina Fey. These are the psychologically endorsed change hacks for making new friends as an adult. I will explain. So US researchers studying the best bonding techniques for friendship found that a big night out, possibly with alcohol involved, from everything they looked at, was the best way to make new friends. I wasn't convinced that academics should be advocating binge drinking, but having found it useful in the past, I wasn't about to argue. This is because if you are letting down your inhibitions in this way, and you share a drama, or you share a sort of an experience, even if it's something small like how to get home after a night out, you are more closely bonded to someone more quickly than people who do not share these dramas, who do not share these sort of how on earth are we going to get home situations. So the next thing I wanted to know was how to get the confidence to be sort of making friends with new people and to be sort of putting yourself out there to start with. And I read about the work of a Chicago improvisation coach who had worked with Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and who agreed to work with me, looking at this classic sort of improvisation technique called yes and. And this is where it's used by actors, used by comedians. It's as a way to move the action on, to show that you're engaged, to show that you are willing to try new things, that you're open to new experiences. You say yes and. So instead of blocking any conversational pathway that opens up, you agree and then you offer something else, which in the context of a night out can lead to quite the time, let me tell you. And it means that you are setting people at ease and you bring out the best in people, and they feel more confident because they feel as though you are on their side. And so it works brilliantly for fostering new relationships. It's even been used in sort of diplomatic circles. Apparently it was used with the Turkish Cypriot conflict quite a lot. But making new friends is also works well for that. So ever a slave to science and pre-twins, I steeled myself for a large one, where gin was consumed and yazoo was sung, and I made some great new friends who are in my gang to this day, and felt as though I'd sort of mastered something. I felt like a proper grown-up, like I can do this, I can talk to the strangers and I can bring them into my inner circle. So that was a fairly liberating experience. The next thing I wanted to try was to address my relationship to finances. As someone who's been typically ostrich-like about money in the past, it was something that I wanted to get better at. And our relationship to money is often fairly deep-rooted. So psychologists agree that this stuff goes deep. I am terrified about spending. I agonize and get very stressed over inevitable bills like, paying the gas bill or the mortgage or car tax. Whereas my other half loves to spend, loves it, spending an alarming amount on eye-wateringly expensive lighting and design wear. And we're moving house today, so I dread to think what's happening right at this very moment. But this is because, I am reticent about spending because I grew up without much financial security, and I am terrified in case something goes wrong again. I like to think positive. My husband grew up in a very Carib and Cagoule type household where a lot of things were handmade. His parents kept chickens and goats. So his sort of spending is an ongoing rebellion against his upbringing. And once we understand our finance personalities and where this is coming from, it can help us to just be aware the next time we're sort of handing over our card for something or just sort of pressing checkout online. It gives us sort of a bit of a, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing this. I'm trying to soothe myself in this way rather than perhaps, spending it automatically without thinking of it. The next technique I learnt, anyone read this? Is Kaizen, the Japanese for improvement. And this is a fascinating philosophy whereby you take small steps towards a goal instead of big steps. We typically think of change in big steps. We want fast results, but actually these don't work. So when we make a big change, the fight or flight mechanism in our brain, in the amygdala, is set on high alert, and we shut down other parts of our brain that might slow us if we were trying to escape a saber-toothed tiger or something. So we shut down the more creative thinking parts of our brain, we shut down some of the memory parts of our brain because we're just focused on this threat and getting through it, and the stress hormone comes surging. Whereas when we make small changes, we can keep the fight or flight in the off position, so we can still use all the parts of our brain. Change is more likely to be successful, and we're not getting stressed in the process. So by doing something for just 60 seconds a day, we can build up our expertise in that. We don't get stressed about it, and we're more likely to be successful. So I started researching into pensions, just 60 seconds a day. By the end of the week, felt confident enough to call them up and say, can I have one of those, please? And they said yes, and I now have a pension, which is very exciting. And my fears about being ostrich-like about money, I'm beginning to resolve because I'm doing a little each day, and it's way less stressful that way. If you're feeling a little bit more open-minded and a bit dream-catchery, you can also try tapping. This is the controversial therapy based on Chinese acupressure, whereby tapping different parts of your body, there are 8 sections, so from the top of your head to the inner corner of your eye, outer corner, just below your eye, philtrum, just that groove between your chin and your lip, your collarbone, and then the side of your body, whilst repeating a phrase that you want to be true. So say you might say, even though I have this problem with spending money, I deeply love and accept myself, whether you do or not yet. And you repeat this tapping until you are supposed to believe it and be in better control of your impulse. I tried it. I'm not sure it particularly worked for me, but it did stop me in my tracks. It is a distraction just before you're about to check out on ASOS or go and spend money on doing something. So if it works for you, it's free and easy. It's worth trying. But I'm more about the Kaizen on that one. So finally, I felt as though I had a lot of areas in my life in order. I was feeling good, but there was still one problem. I was still anxious. I would still get stressed. I'd still worry. And the biggest hurdle for many of us is what's going on inside our heads. So neuroscientists describe the downward spiral that can occur really easily based on little things that have a trickle-down effect. So if, for instance, we work from home for a few days, we maybe don't get as much sunlight, we don't get as much human interaction, we may not get as much exercise. And this might be all right for a day, but after 2 days, maybe 3, we start to feel unfocused, low, we can start to feel quite down, and we need to reverse this spiral. Now, our predisposition to getting in a downward spiral is affected by 3 things: our genetics, our upbringing, and our lifestyle. So the first 2 we can't do anything about. Sorry about that. Blame the parents. But the third we can, lifestyle. So neuroscientists recommend a 5-pronged approach to change the way your mind is operating and to sort of make it be more on your side for this year. The first is getting out more. So we all know sunlight's good for us, but even on a day that seems overcast, getting outside for just 10 minutes, half an hour, has a huge impact on our serotonin levels, on our mood, on our general physical well-being as well. So that's always worth trying. The second neuroscience hack is getting hugged more. This releases oxytocin, and massage can actually boost oxytocin levels by 30%. So I started asking for hugs wherever appropriate and shelled out for a scientifically sanctioned spa session. So that was not my fault. The next one is getting our on. Now, we've probably all read about the benefits of meditation for body and mind, for reducing pain, reducing depression, which is great. It doesn't work for everyone. And what I learned from speaking to psychologists and neuroscientists, and of course then the hardcore meditation and mindfulness experts, was that if it's not feeling right for us, we shouldn't beat ourselves up. That's just giving ourselves something else to worry about and going down the spiral. Studies show that we are 84% more relaxed after watching fish if meditation isn't your thing. So I really tried meditation. I gave it a go. I did Dr. Danny Penman's 6-week course, and I tried body scan meditations, which were semi-helpful, but I just found that it didn't work for me. I ate quite a lot. I put on 2 kilograms in 6 weeks, mainly kettle chips. So in the end, I moved along from meditation to mindfulness, which I found altogether more achievable, because that's paying attention to the little things, practicing gratitude, being present, and something that we can all do every day. So a really great mindfulness exercise that I am now a huge fan of and recommend is the coffee exercise, whereby every morning, or whatever your drink of choice is, instead of doing it whilst scrolling on your phone or checking your email or talking with a colleague, reading something, you just give your full attention to what you're drinking and savour the sensations, the taste, the smell, and really give yourself to that moment, which doesn't take so long. It makes the drink taste a whole lot better, and just that moment of quiet to yourself can set you up really well for the day. The next thing I learned was to unplug, which is a tricky one for all of us, but I realised I'd pretty much been plugged in since I got my first iPod years and years ago. But unplugging can give us a bit more of our mental bandwidth back. A study from the Happiness Institute in Denmark found that people were 55% less stressed after being off Facebook for just a week, which I was staggered by on the one hand, but then on the other, the one scrolling through my phone 5 years deep into someone else's Facebook pictures, I was not surprised at all. But, you know, and I've always considered myself a multitasker, thought that this was an advantage, thought that I was just winning at life by multitasking. Apparently not as well. Multitasking can reduce our IQ to the level of an 8-year-old or a heavy pot smoker, or a heavy pot smoking 8-year-old. So it's much better to single task. We are more creative. We are better able to access memory reserves when we single task. So now I try to do that as well, as much as possible. And then the final thing for getting some calibration in our mind and changing the way we feel and think about things coming into the new year is scheduling worry time. A phrase that I cannot hear without immediately wanting to break out into the MC Hammer tune. So now I'm sharing this earworm with you. You're welcome. But scheduling worry time is called stimulus control, and scientists have found in numerous studies for the last 20 years, it's a wonder more of us aren't doing it, that by scheduling 15 to 30 minutes a day at the same time each day to just write down our worries, we are free to not think about them for the other 23 3/4 hours of a day. And this surprisingly works. So I've tried it for 6 weeks to start with, and I've kind of been doing it ever since. And it just means that I don't have a low-level anxiety as a soundtrack to the rest of my day, because I'm safe in the knowledge that any worries I have will be dealt with later. So there's no point thinking about them right now. So by the end of my leap year, I was feeling more confident. I was sort of feeling ready to make some big changes, and we have. You know, I'm after someone who couldn't even decide what to have for lunch. We've now bought a house. We are staying in Denmark for a while. I'm having twins. I'm writing a novel, and you know, I've made some big day changes, and I would love to sort of share, I guess, a few of my final little quick ways to win at new beginnings with you. And the first of these is to feel small. So getting some perspective can really help, as well as the getting outside to get some fresh air, to see the sun. Getting some perspective can make us realise that anything we're currently worried about, any decision we are struggling over, is really small in the grand scheme of things. So looking at the sea, the sky, even a really big tree can really help us get some perspective and realise that anything we do is unlikely to be irreversible, and it's unlikely to cause the world to end unless we're Donald Trump. So feel small. The second is looking after yourself. So as a women's magazine journalist for 10 years, I tried every health fad going, but I don't work so well if I've only had kale juice for breakfast or sugar puffs. Wang an egg in there and suddenly everything's sunnier. So self-care and just doing these little things that we don't think have a major impact do have a huge trickle down and can really affect our spiral staying decidedly up. So now I look after myself, I exercise when I can, I eat well, I take care of my home, I practice self-kindness, and I feel a lot better for it. The third thing is value your values. So this is the particularly strident owl that I plan to channel through much of 2017. But the idea that we do a lot of things based on other people's expectations. I was going to move back to a whole other country based on what I thought were the expectations of my family. I spent 10 years in a job because I felt like money and prestige were the things that I should chase. I did not think about what I wanted and what my values were and whether what I was doing matched my values. And since doing that, I have felt freer, and I make enough money to pay the rent, and I do work that fulfills me creatively. So valuing your values is a really great thing to think about, so that not worrying about what everyone else's path looks like, and if it doesn't look like yours, just think about what you want. And number 4 is doing something scary. So as part of my year-long experiment, I wanted to try getting out of my comfort zone, and hobbies are a really great way to do this because we are doing it in a safe space. It doesn't matter, the stakes are very low. But we are learning something new and we're getting scared, but in a way that nothing bad can really happen. I took up experimental dance, which was terrifying and something a repressed ex-Catholic schoolgirl should never have to deal with. But I had an amazing time. I did something just for the heck of it, not for work, not for, getting fit particularly, just for fun. And so if getting out of our comfort zone, if getting sweaty palms or mild bowel rumblings are the worst thing that happen when we get out of our comfort zone, we need to do that more. It's really good for us. It opens up our mind in ways you might never have thought possible. And so now I'm all for doing things just for the heck of it. And finally, I learnt to find my inner pilot's voice. A very wise psychologist coached me at length about this idea that if we're on a plane and we experience some turbulence, the pilot comes over the tannoy and says in a calm, almost bored voice, it's going to be a bit bumpy for a while. That's fine. I've dealt with this before. It's not a problem. So the psychologists recommend that we all use this pilot's voice when we are experiencing stress, because stress is normal. We need to learn to accept that will be part of our everyday lives, but that we can handle it. We are stronger than we think. So now I remind myself it's okay not to be okay. A completely stress-free life isn't the goal. That's a Mr. Men book. And to be comfortable with some level of discomfort is how to be more resilient, is how to cope with change, and is sort of the key to a half-decent stab at this thing called life. So now I try and find my inner pilot's voice wherever possible. And that's all from me. Thank you so much. I hope you'll all try having a leap year and let me know how you get on. Thanks.
Thank you, Helen. So we have about 5-10 minutes for questions. If you need to go to the next meeting, this is your moment to leave now. Helen, what did you learn over your leap year that you want to teach your son, your kids?
I think the idea of valuing your values is something hugely useful. Obviously, that's when he's a little bit older. He's only just turning 3. This might be a bit beyond him. But actually, something that I learned whilst dealing with the toddler tantrum phase right now, I spoke to an FBI hostage negotiator, learning the techniques that they use to obviously talk down hostages, but how you can actually apply them to your family, your friends, your colleagues even. And that was hugely useful because it's this behavioral stairway that they use, and you actively listen, you empathize, you build a rapport, you encourage them to cooperate, and then you influence them. So by doing that with him, I teach him that the solution, if you're having a disagreement or if you're having a tough time with someone, is not to shout and scream and throw Lego at them, usually, that it's to talk and it's to listen. And so it's keeping that calmness is really helpful.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Helen?
I really enjoyed your talk, and thank you for the book. I'm definitely going to read it. I think that it's a great idea, but how did you find the time, having a job and a family? I'm a mom myself, and I really like the idea of experimenting with different things, but how did you manage to do it in a year? And did you have assigned time, or...?
Yeah, I mean, I had a deadline from my lovely publishers, but you know, it's my job is being a journalist and an author as well as being a mom. So you know that I completely empathise. There are not enough hours in the day, but you know, that was part of my job. Is that I'm a freelance now because when I moved to Denmark, I couldn't keep on working for. I couldn't speak Danish, so I couldn't write for Danish language publications. So I write freelance articles and I write books, so that's kind of my job. And then I guess I am a massive geek, so I sort of live it. It's incredibly infuriating for my husband, as you'll discover in this book, that I'm thinking about it all the time, and I'm kind of making notes on my phone often because it's something I find hugely interesting. And as we were talking about earlier, there are reams of academic research and scientific papers on change and on resilience. But most people, of course, don't have the time to read it, nor should they. They're relatively dry. But I felt like I was taking one for the team by reading them, so you didn't have to. It's the idea. So.
I think what I found reading the book was that there's a lot of academic rigour, which you almost just blasé pass over, oh, I read this entire paper. So did you get quite good at reading papers and sort of picking out the bits that are interesting?
I just think I'm going to play the geek card again. I think, you know, throughout university, I like doing all that stuff, but I'm aware that most people don't. So that's okay with me. I'll do that one for you guys.
Hi there. Is there a difference in how men or women should approach this? And did you find that in your studies you were mostly thinking about the female side, or?
Interesting question. I don't think there is. No, actually, there's not. So I had a mixture of guinea pigs, male and female. And the one thing that I thought was maybe in the approach to work and relationships, where there'd be a gender difference. And the relationships one, I was assured not. You can't say with 100% certainty, oh, you know, I have a friend who is trying online dating. She kept saying, oh, all men just want younger women. And I was like, do they, all of them? You can't say any of these sweeping statements with 100% certainty. So in relationships, I think ultimately it's pretty similar. In terms of work, I think I study imposter syndrome a little bit, and more women statistically suffer from that than men. But there is a way, according to new research, that you can turn imposter syndrome to your advantage. So more women, you know, even if they do suffer from it, are going to be all right, basically. But yeah, interestingly, I don't buy into too much gender difference, and I think it applies to both.
Hi. I thought it was interesting what you said about scheduling worry time, and it sounds like it could be really useful. But I also heard a lot about like practicing gratitude and writing like 5 things a day that you found great about the day. So do you find those contradicting, or do you prefer one over the other?
I don't do the writing down 5 things a day particularly. I did it for a while, and then when I was encouraging people to sort of, my guinea pigs, to feel more comfortable about their jobs, that can be a really good thing to do. If you think you hate your job, I can bet that there's sort of 3 to 5 things each day you had, even if you had a nice chat with someone, even if there was something nice for lunch in the canteen, there's always something. But I don't see them as conflicting with each other. If you want to do both, then absolutely you can celebrate the positives, and then you can just think, well, I don't need to think about the negatives because I'll be doing that in my worry time later.
You talked about culling friends.
Yes.
And that just feels really mean. Have you got any more thoughts on how you would go about culling friends?
Well, I have a friend who's a lot braver than me, and she did it in a letter, which I thought seemed quite blunt. But I know, right? But I spoke to a psychologist who said it's not a bad idea, because then you're thinking really carefully. You're not going to say anything you're likely to regret. You should never make it sort of you did this, you. It's always I. So it's sort of, I don't feel this friendship is working for us. I think we should take some time apart. There are different ways the experts recommend of doing it. You can sort of do ghosting. You can dilute the relationship by only seeing them with other people, or you can do the letter. And you know, studies have shown, and the psychologists that I spoke to said that once that initial pain is over, it's kind of better for both parties, because if a relationship's been draining for you, it's likely it's also been that way for your friend, and then you're both free to pursue other friendships with the knowledge that you've learnt from the last one. So harsh but fair.
It is strange that we accept that in with our partners in sexual relations, but we don't accept it with our friends, which is something I never thought about before. And have you've not culled a friend?
I have, yeah. I think moving to a different country is a really good way of culling friends. Big events are, like weddings are a good way, because you have a limited guest list. So there are lots of life stages where a natural cull will occur. And rather than just feeling guilty, and I used to feel terrible, like, oh, I have not been in touch with lady or man for ages. And now I don't feel guilty about it. I think, well, I can't be friends with everyone. I've got my monkey group, I'm fine.
Great. One more in the middle.
Hi. If you make a decision that you think afterwards is possibly not the best decision or a bad decision, how do you kind of move on from that and not let it kind of set you back too much?
Well, I think you can change your mind. It's totally okay. And I think we don't grow up thinking about that very often, or thinking that's okay. We also often grow up very uncomfortable with failure, but to be able to make good decisions, we have to be comfortable with some level of failure. I was talking to someone this morning about this, and that actually anyone successful in any field of business or life has had some whopping failures behind them. So making a wrong decision, that's okay, because then you've ruled out one option. You know that's not the right one. So it's reframing it in a positive way.
Please join me in a massive round of applause thanking Helen Russell.
Thanks very much.